Supportables League, it does not seem like that long ago that we were in Kelsey and Raph's place, watching the Super Bowl, talking about next season, talking about how much you enjoyed last season, and yet here we are, draft is done, and week 1 is in the books. Hopefully last year spread into this year, and people actually watched some of the games, especially some of the great night games that we had this week. Obviously, we got our injuries, we got our overperformances, our underperformances. We had former champions or league champions struggle this year, and we definitely had last year's kind of low bar set the high bar for this year. So all a brand new. Last year now means nothing except for the trophy. Let's get on to some what happened in week 1, and then we'll get on to our matchups. If I even have a chance of doing this week by week, this is probably the section I'm going to have to be the most economical time-wise with. So I'm going to go Goldilocks and the Three Bears porridge style and just give you 3 takes, one way too hot, one way too cold, and hopefully one that's just right. My too hot, and it's so hot of a take that I don't even fully believe it, but it is certainly a reaction to week 1. Offenses, or at least quarterbacks, were really bad. Epically bad. We usually have a bit of a funny start to the season. We'll get to that a little bit later. But this particular year, we only had 2 quarterbacks throw over 300 yards in the first week. But even kind of scaling that backwards, we did have this rookie class that was supposed to be phenomenal. And Caleb Williams threw for under 100. Daniels didn't throw for much, but he did run. And Bo Nix just threw a ton, but all very short passes. Other than that, the other kind of mainstays or the other kind of reported rookies did not have a good one. But sticking with our quarterbacks, just kind of to put it in reference, 32 starting quarterbacks. The only one that got really knocked out was Jordan Love at the end of the game, and he did fine, especially yards-wise. He was okay. Aaron Rodgers did sit out the last drive, which would have gotten him a few more yards. But of the 32, 17 of them, so math majors, that's more than half, were under 200 yards. As an old Spanish teacher used to say, that's not bueno at all. Horrible starts to the year for most of the quarterback, which means in our cases, tight ends and wide receivers. So who did score? You're looking mostly running backs, and actually kickers had a phenomenal week. And that's what you really sign up for fantasy for, right? Is the kickers. 19 different 50-yard plus field goals were hit this week. And there was actually, that doesn't even include the one from Dallas's Aubrey, who he did technically tie league record 66-yard field goal, but it was called back due to a penalty, and they didn't have the guts to kick a 71, because even against the Browns, I guess they felt that was too much. So who knows if this is offenses that are going to stick around, but certainly not one that we get off to. 2 teams actually won, Bears and Steelers, without scoring an offensive touchdown. So week 2, here's hoping the scores are a little bit higher. My too cold of a take, because it's not even really a take, but it's certainly something I noticed. NFL's awesome at scheduling games, pretty much. Now, number one, this is the first time I've ever been a fan of night games, because I'm actually in a place when you wake up in the morning and the night games are happening. It's actually quite nice. But the night games were all the rivalry ones that we pretty much probably wanted to see. You got the return matchups with Kansas City and Baltimore, even to an extent an NFC power matchup in Brazil with Green Bay and Philadelphia. But you've got the Goff-Stafford wife swap or quarterback swap. I know you got to be careful, especially with Stafford involved. But that game where they not only are a redo of last year's playoff run, but also they both have experiences with both teams. So that rivalry game was great. Not a night game, but the Arthur Smith revenge matchup, Pittsburgh and Atlanta. So they did really match up those games to make them a little more competitive. But even on the weaker side, I read something that almost 2/3 of elimination pools were pretty much done, or at least 2/3 of people were out because they took Cincinnati to beat New England. And they shocked everything. New England probably could have only beaten 3 teams so far this year in week 1, and they picked one of them, the NFL, to make that a game. So now we have to think, are they a decent team? Tampa Bay and New Orleans looked great, but that's because Carolina and Washington probably didn't. But now we have to think, are they good, or is the other team just really that bad? So ultimately, if you can make me care about games that I really shouldn't care about, well done, NFL. You did a good job. For my just right, and this is my take pretty much every year, back when I used to live in a city where you actually could throw a little bit of money down on the first, on the actual matchups of the game or the results of the games, point spread or not, the first 4 to 5 weeks are actually really fun because the NFL odds makers haven't caught up to who's really good and really bad, and we're really going on kind of last year's records and the predictions coming in. But you can always bank on week 1 being just crazy. Thinking about it already, Number one, the best or the most coveted fantasy football player didn't even play in the Monday night game. And apparently the 49ers knew this for a while and they just decided to keep this one to themselves. In many people's board, the number one wide receiver, and in some cases the number 2 pick overall, was arrested on his way to the game. No jokes there, not really that funny, except for he exploded and had an amazing game afterwards after saying to the officer, apparently, that he actually did want to be a cop at some day. So odd experience there, but that's just week 1, I guess. Denver had 2 safeties in the first half. You had a kickoff return, punt returns, pick sixes, unorthodox ways of teams winning. There was 4 12 or more point deficits that were made of, actually I think 14 or more point deficit games that the comebacks kind of came about in the fourth quarter. So really nothing was stable. And even probably one of my favorite little pieces in the Brazil game, if you watched the entire first half, people were falling all over the place. Apparently they couldn't get their grips. Now the US is funny. It can't really sort out a lot of political issues, but at halftime, it could certainly sort out cleats and everybody was running fine afterwards. But I think my funniest piece is knowing some of the audience and maybe the amount of Americans who probably haven't been to Brazil. Just think now of the percentage of Americans who honestly think, because they saw it, that the entire country of Brazil is just super slippery and you're going to fall everywhere. Huge matchups, great performances, and certainly some duds. But to get to the specifics of players, we're going to take a pause and we'll jump into this week's matchups. Our highest score of the week, going from getting tub thumped and finishing dead last year to being first out of the gate this year. Now, granted, Jackie did start undefeated last year for the first few weeks, but she never had the highest score, I don't believe. She was squeaking through. So one of the biggest differences this year, and I'll try and be as quick to the point as I can on these, aside from just reading all of them down the road, because obviously she did have a disappointing start to the week in tight end, but her receivers were phenomenal. Now, we know she's got great receivers, but if she does this every week, she's certainly going to be tough. She also had the pickup of the week by getting her second quarterback, Baker Mayfield. He was just sitting there for anyone to take and ended up as our quarterback 3 on the week, which ended up being obviously a massive boost for her. In terms of receivers, that did phenomenal. I mean, Hill did crack our top 5. He was our receiver 3. Running backs did good enough to go through. And obviously the kicker was it was 4th kicker overall. It was actually a massive week for kickers, but our second highest that we actually started. If you look at her bench, she actually left some points on the bench as well. So that could be a strong statement for Jackie moving forward. In terms of Jake Paul, it's not like you were a slouch. In fact, you would have beaten most teams this week. You had the dubious distinction of facing our number 1, meaning it just wasn't going to go your way. You kind of went the other way around it. It's not necessarily like you had too many standout number 1 performances. In fact, I don't think other than New Orleans as a defense, you cracked our top 5 for any skill or position player. But you really didn't have any downside either. Everyone's in the double digits. If you can keep that up, you'll be a tough team moving forward. And like I said, if you look down at the bottom, not only did you have the best sub of the week that could have gone in and maybe made some differences for you. I don't think it would have made up that, but it would have narrowed the gap slightly. Taking a look at our total scores, you see that you actually would have beaten most teams other than just maybe 2 or 3 others. You would have finished 4th on the week overall. So bad luck for you. Great start for Jackie. Well done, show business. I think now we know that Randy has 2 things in common, at least, with Taylor Swift. Number 1, I guess technically they're both childless cat ladies, but number 2, they both made a big splash this week. One with a statement and one with a statement win, being our number 2 scorer overall, having a great, phenomenal performance around. Similar to Jackie, apparently you don't need tight ends to actually do well, and you did have some running back issues, but you certainly didn't have wide receiver issues. Cooper Kupp was our number 2 overall, so well done there. Daniels, a phenomenal start. Maybe we could look at how well he was as a quarterback. Okay, but how he was as a fantasy quarterback, fantastic. He was our quarterback 4 on the week. You also benefited from the kicking barrage that happened this week. You are our kicker 5 for the week, so well done there. If you look at your bench, as noted, you did leave our number 1 wide receiver on your bench, so actually you got our top 2 wide receivers, which is pretty exceptional, and certainly you had some depth as well on the bench for running back, so future opponents be wary. 146 is not out of your reach on a weekly basis. Our defending champions Trip coming out of the gate now. Do remember, they were not our overall regular season winners, so they did struggle occasionally during the regular season, and they still battled, so they're down but not out. They did not have a great performance. You underperformed quite considerably. I think we can look. Quarterbacks here handily did not do super well for you. They were way down, and while your kicker was drafted early, he actually was struggling a little bit. He is automatic from inside 30 or 35, but the older he gets, the further he ain't kicking, but I'm sure he'll have a bounce back week. Kelsey as well, massively underperformed. You did have some points on your bench, but realistically, just not your week. Your big studs didn't come out to play. So here's hoping for you to bounce back next week. And to Randy, well done. Number 2 overall this week. It wasn't Kelsey's bench that killed my vibe, although your bench did have at least one stud on there. Williams was our wide receiver 4 on the week, and you didn't play him, but Allen was our wide receiver or quarterback 1, and you certainly did play him. Now, on my side, I did have the quarterback 2, so we did have the dueling major threats at quarterback. Even our second quarterbacks, you did beat me there. Love did get hurt, which is even a double whammy, but Tua did have 300 yards. He was one of the only ones to do that. Paka Nakua on your side getting hurt, so hopefully the injury bug doesn't kill us both too much. But again, I think you're one of these examples of you didn't have too many other people in the top 5 at their position, but you didn't really have too many duds. Sure, you also fell victim to the tight end fever, like we all seem to get, and Laporta underperformed, and Dobbs wasn't there, but it wasn't a massive underperformance, whereas almost everybody else hit or exceeded. I'd say Kamara was probably one of your biggest bets there, and Pittsburgh's defense certainly helping you out. For me, I definitely left some points on the bench. Dobbins was the running back 3, and he was on the pine. Worthy wasn't in the top 5, but you can see by points he was close, although I did make the right calls in terms of quarterback. Also, Sting is or similar to Jake Paul's there, but I would have beaten most. I was the 5th highest scoring team, but unfortunately, it is what it is. The matchups are the matchups, and Kelsey, you're 1-0, and I'm 0-1. Congratulations, Juliet and Lara, to a great start. Now, you did underperform slightly in points, but it doesn't matter. A win is a win. And in terms of your studs, the people that did well enough, and then the people who did poor weeks didn't hurt you that much. Lamar was our quarterback 5 on the week, and Mixon, huge surprise, doubling his predicted points. He was our running back 2, so great start there. Everyone else just kind of treaded water. I mean, Connor did have a great performance, not in our top 5, but 17 from a running back. I'll take that every week. You didn't also have the huge lows that some of us fared in any other position other than wide receiver. That one gave you a little bit of problems. And if you look at your bench, you do have some potential solutions here, but just something to bear in mind moving forward. Fourth and Conquer, you are our second of our new teams this year. You did not fare as well as Randy, unfortunately. You did underperform, and you didn't really have too many people go off. You know, sometimes it's actually better if you're going to have a bad week. You might as well have it all around. Now, your kicker was fantastic. He was our kicker 2 on the week, but he was our top scoring kicker that anyone played. No one had Pittsburgh's kicker. And it did make Monday night slightly more interesting, I guess. You also didn't have a whole lot of love on the bench, but you're hoping for a lot of bounce backs from most of your guys. Some of your big people just had bad matchups, didn't necessarily perform as needed, even though some of your running backs at least showed they had some depth, because I don't think you can count on your kicker. But as a league, I don't think we can count on CeeDee Lamb having the kind of week he had this week. So shake it off, head back into week 2. And Juliet and Laura, congratulations on the 1-0 start. For Raph and James, a win is a win. For all the talk coming into it, maybe you underperformed slightly, but it doesn't matter in predicted points. What matters is you are 1-0. Dirty South, unfortunately, the loss is a bigger loss. You've done the math, and actually that kicker performance from San Francisco on Monday night was enough to pass you and make sure that you were going to be our drink buyer for the week. So just quickly, I think if we look at the rosters, once again, when you have the lower scores, you're not going to have too many top 15 performances. I do think your running back showed a little bit of something, at least in Walker. You do have C.J. Stroud who went off. Mahomes underperformed, but against a tough defense, I don't think that's that much of a concern. And again, you did have some people you might want to consider for next week, especially since you had some love on the bench and some running backs, especially Stevenson, who was our 5th highest scorer. No blame there. I didn't think they would do much anyway, but again, again, I was wrong. Now, Pamela, what stinks for you is you were ready to have a big Monday night with McCaffrey, but wisely, you had him off on the bench, knowing that apparently that even though they weren't announcing it to everyone else, they were telling some people and maybe giving you the hint to take him out of the lineup. Because honestly, with Barkley's performance, if McCaffrey was in there, that probably would have been enough to maybe win, if not certainly get out of the basement for this league. But Marvin Harrison's abysmal opening performance certainly didn't help you out, so you're going to need a little bit more receiver love, especially considering the class of receivers you're meant to have. So Pamela, unfortunately, you are our first drink buyer, so you can organize the round. I think you've already communicated that on the chat that you're going to need a little bit of time as you're out of town, and that's no problem. Raph and James, a win is a win. You're 1-0. Move on to week 2. Just taking a look at next week's matchups, we do have a battle of the 0-1s here, and I'm assuming some moves might be done, but Pamela, neither one of us are predicted to go off the charts quite yet, unless we have some moves in mind. I think just highlighting what seems to be some of the better matchups, we have 2 1-0 teams here, and Bench Not Killing My Vibe and Show Business predicted for a tight matchup, and you'll notice most of them have already made some adjustments, especially based on injury. I think another one to highlight, our other 2 1-0 teams, or 2 of our other 1-0 teams, meant to have a 3-point differential in predictions. Now, while we know those are just predictions, that's obviously a matchup we got to keep an eye on. We have our only 1-0 and 0-1 split here, defending champions and defending league regular season champion are going after it, so that's always a fun matchup. And then certainly here, 2 0-1s looking to get a win on the board. And predicted-wise, Jake Paul looking pretty decent, but fourth and conquer, that doesn't mean anything at this point. A lot of moves to be made. That's week 1 in the books. I'd say now it's time for week 2, but most of you know that. I've been paying attention to the waiver wire, and a lot of people have been pretty active in either trying to pick up where they did not have or correct some injury issues, or maybe pick up that flyer that's going to help you make the run this year. Either way, you know the Thursday nighter, we have Buffalo and Miami. They have a lot of players in our mix, so make sure you're paying attention to that. Other than that, it's not a funky week. No international games that I know of, no bye weeks as of yet, so it should be fairly decent unless you've already hit the injury bug. So pay attention to your matchups. Make sure you talk a lot of smack, because that's always entertaining for the rest of us. And as always, best of luck in week 2.